Hey everybody, it is Saturday evening and we are going to take another trip around the world. So as usual, we're going to start here at my 29 miscellaneous. Not a lot to talk about. I really don't feel like there's a lot to talk about in the entire fish room this week, although I'm sure I'll come up with something. I just haven't really done a lot in here this week. But my 29 here just got a water top off and I changed out the filter pads. Recently, I put a new filter on my waterfall tank. My waterfall is temporarily shut down, and the tank itself needed sort of hang on the back temporary filter. And so I could jumpstart the cycle on the filter. I stole one of the filter pads, or one of the biofilters, out of here. And yet, even within a couple of days of having a brand new biofilter pad in there, I was getting clogged up filters and overflow again. Although in this case, it was not because of the biofiltration, it was simply because of the filter pads. I don't know what it is about this tank, but those filters just get clogged up, and I get backflow through the center really, really quickly. Literally, with just a matter of days, I've got water flowing back through the middle, and I've got to change those filter pads out. So this tank is one of those few tanks that actually gets the filter tended to far more frequently than the water changes itself. Most of my tanks, I'll do water changes and not mess with the filter, because the canister filter is a lot more sort of hassle to deal with, and so I'll just do a simple water change and leave the filter for another time. Whereas with this tank, I actually have to just go ahead and do some quick work on the filter, maybe top off a few gallons of water, and I'll worry about getting around to doing an actual water change in the future, because it hasn't been that long since I've done one on this tank. So other than that, I still need to get in there and cut that anubias back. You can see this big main branch of that rhizome really needs to be cut back, probably down here somewhere. I'll cut this whole top section off. Don't forget, as always, I do sell all my plants that I cut down. I got plenty of stuff available right now: anubias, water sprite, java fern, all that good stuff. Check my email down below, the same old story. Get in touch with me. We can make arrangements, etc., etc. The other thing about this tank that I've been enjoying while I was standing here for a few moments, waiting for that angelfish to come out from hiding, is I've been watching my loaches chase each other around the bottom of the tank, and they are always so much fun. And I've been particularly enjoying this one. Most of my tanks have all natural stuff in it, but this is one of my earlier tanks, and I do have a few unnatural things in it, like that ceramic cichlid stone. And if you'll see the little face poking out of there, that is one of my loaches. Loaches love to get in little tiny holes and caves and nooks and crannies. So if you are thinking about getting loaches, and I do recommend them, loaches are just fantastic fish. You got to give them lots and lots of places to hide, and like, again, little nooks, crannies, crevices between rocks, that sort of thing is important for them. On that note, try to be careful and set it up so that there's not places that they can wiggle into but can't wiggle out of. I have seen loaches sort of wedge their way into cracks in pieces of wood and never come back out again. So they are sort of notorious for burrowing their way into little tight spots. So if you're going to get loaches, and like I said, I do recommend it, just give them lots of places to hide, little places to dart in and out of. Really, really fun fish to watch. And you can see they're just chasing each other all around the bottom of the tank. So that's all that's really going on with the 29. My 55-gallon gourami tank here. Nothing really new going on in this tank that I can think of. I do have some new coolie loaches that I have currently in quarantine, and that will go in here eventually because of the two coolie loaches I already have in here. And from time to time I have seen them come out now. Oh, there's one now on cue. Look at that little face sticking out. So they tend to hide under my leaves right here, and then you can see there's sort of a gap under that rock, and then of course underneath of this whole big piece of wood is all hollowed out, and there's actually a couple of quite large fish under there right now that live under there almost permanently. One of them being one of my big loaches, my green loach, or red-tail loach, is under there, always under there. So we will see some more loaches in this tank, but they are in quarantine right now. My red coloration is starting to come back. That is sort of always an ongoing thing. I've actually been thinking a little bit about this today. I watched a video the other day from Rachel O'Leary. She's a popular fish tuber person. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with her videos. She was talking about cyanobacteria and is approaching it a new way. She's trying a new product to see how that would work. And she kind of summed up my thoughts about the cyanobacteria. In her case, it's even more extreme than mine, whereas most of my tanks are set up very similar. Hers are all set up almost identical, almost production line style, and yet she has cyanobacteria in some tanks and not others, and it grows more in some tanks and less in others. And like me, she has no idea where the rhyme or reason is why it does that. Why does it grow in some tanks and not others? They're all basically set up the same. The stuff is like algae, you know, it's a single-celled organism. You'd think it would just simply transfer from one tank to the other, but it really doesn't. And this is just one of those tanks where I always seem to get it. I don't know what it is. I long ago gave up trying to figure out why it comes back in this tank or why I even get it in this tank, and I just don't get it in other tanks. And I just see it as part of the maintenance of my aquarium. You know, if you've got a lawn, you have to mow it in the summertime. If you've got trees, you got to rake the leaves. It's just part of what you got to do. And when I got to do water changes and stuff like that, every now and again, a couple of times a year maybe, I might have to do a chemi-clean treatment, or depending on the cyanobacteria. In this tank, for some reason, it's that reddish stuff seems to be more prevalent than the green cyanobacteria, which again, no idea why. I usually associate this red cyanobacteria with saltwater environments, my brackish tank. And when once upon a time I used to have a marine tank, it was bright red, rusty color on the inside like this. But this is a freshwater, and it's always turns red. So I don't know why, and again, I just don't care. It's just part of the maintenance on this tank, not really trying to go into a big discussion on cyanobacteria at the moment, but it was something I was just thinking about recently, and now that I'm noticing how red it is in this tank, I thought it was worth mentioning there. I was actually thinking about another one of my tanks, and we will get to that in a little bit, and we'll probably bring up the mowing the lawn analogy again, because that looks much more like a green lawn growing across the bottom of the tank, but we'll save that one for when we get there. Anyway, not a lot going on in the tank, just a little bit of a look at it, and some of that bright red, pretty cyanobacteria in there. So moving on to I guess we're still calling this my T-bar tank. I don't really know what else to call it. I guess I could start calling it my angelfish tank again, but I've got another tank in this room that I call my angelfish tank now. So, whatever, this tank, my 55-gallon tank, maybe we'll just start calling it that. Again, not a lot going on. I went in here not too long ago, and I gave a big old whackety chop to the Anubias in there. I really cut it back and opened the tank up. You can really see the diamond tetras swimming around in here. I'm tempted to add a few more to the school. I really, really like these diamond tetras. They're so beautiful. And now that you can see them under nice bright light, swimming around out in the open like that, they're even better looking. And their activity is cool. I like the way they chase each other around. I know they're shaped very much like most other tetras, and I've always kind of thought of them as being interchangeable, with the exception of how they look. You know, like how much difference are these versus skirt tetras, for example? And the answer is a lot. These are very different than the skirt tetras. The way they chase each other around and pair off, their spawning activity and their sort of pre-spawning challenges and dances are always different. And they're just a really, really neat fish. So I'm very happy with my diamond tetras in here. And again, surprisingly, I got these from a big chain pet store. The Petco was carrying diamond tetras. I don't know if it was a one-time thing or not, but I haven't seen them in there since. And if I do, I'm probably going to grab a few more and maybe bolster that school up a little bit. I'm still considering moving my green giant angelfish over into the angelfish tank. Right now, the German blue angelfish is over there, and it looks okay, but it just doesn't really pop the way this one did. This fish underneath that light in the other tank just looked stunning. And so I'm thinking about at some point getting in there and netting it out and moving them and swapping them around on one final angelfish swap here. So we'll see how that goes. And you can see my Pleco doesn't have quite as many places to hide now, but he tries. He's hanging in there, literally in this case. And somewhere in there is my Synodontis lucipinus as well. And I actually haven't seen that. It's probably swam by while I was talking and I just didn't notice. So if you saw a little black and white spotted catfish swimming around, that's what that was, a little Synodontis leucopinus. It's in there somewhere, trust me. It's a little thing, so it's easy to hide. All right, moving on to my 40 breeder here. Couple of things going on in this tank. One is my Molly, who I hope we don't see in this video. Oh, there she is right there. She's kind of hanging out. And I'm hoping she just stays where she is. Whenever she thinks food's coming, she gets up and she tries to swim around. She's really old. Her swim bladder just completely doesn't work anymore at all. And it's just really a struggle for her to stay up in the water column. So when she thinks food's coming, she swims around and tries to get some food, and the rest of the time she just lays on either the bottom, or recently she's been taken to laying on the leaves like that, and that way she doesn't have to waste energy keeping herself afloat, as it were. So that's the one thing that's going on. The other thing that's going on in here is I've been deliberately putting less and less algae wafers in here as a food source. I'm still feeding my normal amount of flake food and occasionally throwing in the shrimp pellets, the sinking shrimp pellets, but the sinking algae wafers that I'm usually so generous with, because it's a great food and just about every fish loves the high carry algae wafers. They really do. I buy them by the kilo and I go through a lot of them. I'll put a link down below to those as well if you're interested. You buy them by the kilo and it's a lot cheaper. And again, they don't go bad, so you know, even if you've only got a few fish tanks, it takes you a year to go through them, you're still going to go through them, you know. So if you can afford I think it's like $45 for a kilo, but that's 2.2 pounds of them for $45, as opposed to, you know, the 12 or 15 bucks you pay for the 8 or 10 ounce bottle of it you get at the fish store. So again, it's worth spending a couple of little extra dollars there, and you get a huge thing of the high carry algae wafers. Anyway, I have stopped putting so many of them in the tank, and I don't know if you can tell, but I can certainly tell that everything is getting a lot greener, because a lot of the vegetation and stuff that's been covered by so much of that algae is being worked on by my little army of algae eating fish in there. I've got 4 of the Siamese algae eaters. I've got some pleco type fish in there, a couple of rubber lips. I think one of them might even be a clown pleco. And well, she got up anyway. I was afraid she was going to do that. Good, she's going to go back to her perch over there. I used to have a few live bearers in there. I might have a guppy or two that's still swimming around. I'm honestly not even sure, to tell you the truth. I don't see any offhand, so, you know, guppies come and go sometimes. It's hard to keep track of them. So I do have a lot of algae-eating fish in there, and if I sort of reduce how much artificial algae I'm throwing in there, it kind of forces them to forage around the tank, and as a result, it's making a difference. It's really getting everything cleaned up a little bit. You can actually see that Siamese algae eater right there working on the woodwork as we speak. In there doing its thing. So the tank is getting a lot cleaner. I'm telling you, these Siamese algae eaters are worth their weight in gold. And they do eat hair algae, which to my experience just about no other fish does. I know there's a lot of different species of hair algae. I believe what I have is Spirogyra, but they do eat it, and nothing else eats it. So if you can get yourself some Siamese algae eaters, go for it. They are fantastic. All right, moving along to my 125-gallon native tank. Not a huge amount of changes going on to this one. The 2 main changes are a brand new filter. I just put a brand new Sun 304B on there. I've shot some videos about that recently. If you're interested, you can look on my channel and find them easily enough. Not going to go into a bunch of detail about that. I just put a new filter on it, no biggie. And we swapped out my, I'm going to call it my wild type angelfish there. Sorry about all that glare on my blue shirt. I probably should have. I usually dress in all black when I'm shooting videos like this, and then that way, even if I do show up in a reflection, you don't notice me so much, but that blue shirt really stands out there, so sorry about that. Put the angelfish in there, put a new filter on it. I also grabbed one of the old pieces of wood from when I rescaped it recently, and this piece of wood had dried out and was laying on the ground. I put that back up top in addition to this one that I put up top recently, and that helps to sort of break up the line of that back edge of the tank and makes it look a little less unnatural and squared off. So I've done that. I don't know if I've mentioned that before in a video or not, but there you go. Excuse me. My water flow is much, much better now that I've got the new filter on there. It turned out all it was the hoses were clogged. Not the filter itself, not the inner workings, not the impeller, which is what I always thought it was. But in this case, it was the hoses themselves, or possibly the inside part of the... they all think they're getting fed too. Possibly the inside part of the manifold where it sort of seals in and closes. You know, in this part, possibly in there, you know, but on the inside part of it, wherever it was, that was just all gunged up and clogged up. And I didn't determine that until after I'd gone through the whole process of putting a new filter on and everything else. So, no harm done. It was probably about time to replace that old filter anyway. I got a brand new filter on here. I'm not using the UV light on it, so that won't deteriorate the inside of my filter. And with any luck, I should get years and years of use out of it without any issue whatsoever, provided I get in there and clean the old pipes out once in a while. We'll keep that nice vigorous flow. So, I do like the way that looks. It gives it the feel of sort of babbling brook, or maybe a little underground spring bubbling up out of the ground and feeding this sort of river slash pond, whatever you want to think about it as. And that angelfish, of course, looks absolutely fantastic in there. I'm really happy with it. Dealing with a little bit of algae problem, a little bit of cyanobacteria going on in there. Not as much cyanobacteria as I thought. I did treat this with ChemiClean, and when we were all said and done, it's still very green in there. And that is indicative of algae. The ChemiClean does not work on algae. It only cleans nuisance type stuff out of your tank. It'll clean that off-walks, like the grunge that just grows over everything, and it'll kill the cyanobacteria and stuff like that. It doesn't harm your cycle. And it doesn't harm algae or plants or fish or anything like that. It oxidizes that other stuff and cleans it up. So the fact that all this green stuff is still in there lets me know that that is algae, and I need to get some more algae eating type fish in this tank. With the amount of light I've got shining down into this tank, it's no wonder I'm having a little bit of a algae outbreak or whatever. And the water also seems a little bit sort of almost cloudy, and I don't know if it's just detritus that's being stirred up because there's so many fish in this tank now and there's so much activity, or if it's just the glass looks grungy. I mean, when I look in there, the water doesn't look cloudy when I look at it like this. Tannin stained, yes, but certainly not cloudy. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Again, I think it's just a result of, we're going to have to go through an adjustment period while we figure out what exactly that much light is going to wind up doing to this tank. So there you go. Anyway, that's all that's going on in my native tank. My snail tank, let me turn this fan off. I always keep a fan on in the room just to keep the air circulating around so it doesn't get too humid and stuffy in here. Can it be humid and stuffy at the same time? I just put a cuttle bone in here. I don't know if it's floating. There it is. I noticed that the snail shells were so thin that when I tried to pick them up, the shells were just cracking and crushing. And the whole purpose for feeding Butterbean, my puffer, the snails, is so that it crunches on the shells and it keeps its teeth worn down. Like a rodent, the puffer's teeth will continue to grow, and so they have to chew on hard shelled stuff to wear their teeth down. And in this case, the shrimp, my water's so soft, there's no calcium in my water, and the snails in there just were so soft it wasn't really doing anything. So by putting the cuttlebone in there, I've given the snails a source of calcium. Their shells are much, much harder now, and I've already noticed a difference in the way Butterbean eats the snails just from simply putting a cuttlebone in the tank. It's also been suggested that I could use eggshells. I actually do that quite often. I've got some eggshells crushed up in a mortar and pestle in the other room. I just haven't decided which tank the eggshells are going to eventually end up in, but I already do have some pre-crushed eggshells that are waiting to go in a tank somewhere. So this tank is I ought to call this my garden tank, but this is my purple spotted gudgeon tank, whatever this fish is called. I was having trouble bringing its name to mind for a moment there. But this is probably my least exciting and least active fish. It's pretty aggressive at dinner time. It'll, grab its food pretty aggressively. But other than that, it just does this. It just sits there and does pretty much a whole lot of nothing. I've had a lot of suggestions about what kind of fish I could put in the tank with it. I've had people suggest maybe putting that tilapia in this tank or maybe an angelfish, and it just doesn't work. This is a really nasty, aggressive fish. Every other fish I've tried putting in here did not work. Originally, my T-bar was in here, even at full grown, and this fish was beating up on my T-bar, and the T-bar was taking injuries and losing scales. I've got a rubberlip pleco, it's an armor-plated catfish, and I never see it because it hides from this gudgeon. If the gudgeon sees that pleco on the bottom, it goes down and tries to bite it or tries to eat it or something. I've also got that little South American bumblebee catfish in this tank, and likewise, well, that one never comes out anyway, so I can't tell whether that's hiding from this fish or if it's just hiding from life, but it never comes out. Except late at night after the lights are out and it's dark. But deep down, if you can see through all that glare, there's a little cave right there, and that's where the catfish lives. So that's it. I got a rubberlip pleco in this tank somewhere, and I assume it is still alive because look how scraped clean all those rocks are, everything. That is the handiwork of a rubberlip pleco, and if I had to guess, I'd say it probably lives right underneath of that flat rock, and it just hides all the time because of that gudgeon. So this tank really is just, I'm kind of waiting for that gudgeon to die. I might be an old man or an older man by the time that gudgeon dies. I don't know how long they live. I don't know how old it was when I got it, but I've had it for years now. And again, it's just kind of a love-hate relationship with that fish. It's really boring, but at the same time, it's a really cool fish. And I just, there's a 40-gallon tank just sitting here. I feel like just kind of going to waste because there's so much I could do with this. And as you can see, all I really do with it is just kind of ignore it and let the plants grow until they're out of control. And then I get in there and do some serious aquatic gardening, and we trim back all those plants, and we'll get the tank all straightened up. And so it's getting about time for that. There'll be a video coming up soon. A lot of these plants will become available for sale. I believe that is Ludwigia right there. So, temple plant, all kind of good stuff going on in there. And again, all I've got in the other room already. So check my email down below if you're interested in any of my aquatic plants for sale. So moving on to my 125-gallon tank. Let's kind of step around here for a moment. Got a few things in the way, including my now semi-defunct waterfall tank. But we'll get to that if we got time at the end of this video. So that is a full look at the whole 125-gallon tank. Haven't done anything in this one except for a water change about a week ago, and I wiped the glass down and, basic maintenance kind of stuff. No big deal. Haven't added any fish, no deaths, nothing unusual going on in here. I did pull a huge chunk of the water sprite out because this tank just grows water sprite like crazy. I actually threw all that water sprite away. I've got so much of it in the other room that I just I don't have any room to put any more water sprite in my grow out tank. So again, if you're interested in any water sprite or whatever, let me know. I got plenty of it. You will get a lot for your money's worth. So hit my email up down in the comment section or in the description, and lots of water sprite available. My Tenopoma actually seems to be a little less active now. In fact, I'm trying to find him. He usually hangs out and hides right down here. I really need to get in here and thin this out to some degree. I got in and thinned this out last time I was in there. I pulled a lot of fern out of the middle and really opened that up. I know it's hard to imagine that's opened up, but I really did open that up quite a bit. This fern, however, grows all the way back to the back glass, and the power head back here that blows the water across the back is not able to move much of that water across the back of the tank anymore. It does still move some of it, but not nearly like it used to. So I really need to get in and pull some of that out of there too, and maybe that'll give the Tenopoma a little less place to conceal himself, because I really don't see him in there anywhere. My rainbow shark is still doing well and looking fantastic in this tank. I'm so happy that I moved this fish into this tank. You know, I honestly don't even remember what tank this was in. I think it started out in my 20 open top office tank, my 20 long upstairs, before I finally brought it down here and put it in this tank. And it just goes so well in this tank. And because of the size of the tank, the fish can certainly grow out to its full potential and everything else. And of course, the color scheme fits with the overall color theme of this tank. And it just looks awesome. And I'm really enjoying that brand new leaf that's coming out on my tiger lotus in there. That's nice and dark red and beautiful looking. Of course, it'll fade and get paler as it gets bigger, like the rest of these, but it certainly looks pretty coming out nice and red at the bottom like that. So somewhere in this tank, I have a Tenopoma. There he is. That's the spot he normally hangs out in. So he's actually, now that my Synodontis is dead, a little less active, I think. I don't know if it's my imagination, I'm putting too much into it or not, but he used to be out and about a lot more, it seems like, and now he just kind of spends a lot of time doing what he's doing now. Even when it's feeding time, I almost have to coax him to come out to get his food before everybody else eats it. So I might try to find another Synodontis to go in here. But most Synodontis are hard water fish. They're African catfish. A lot of them come out of the Rift Valley. And there are a few of them that do very well in my soft, sort of neutral water. And the Euopteris, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that properly or not, but the one that I had, the African spotted, whatever it was called, I can't even remember what they're, African featherfin, that's what they called it. They used to sell them at PetSmart, but they don't anymore. So if I can find that species again, I might put it back in here just for the sake of my Tenopoma there. Although my Tenopoma's getting pretty old too. He's probably 6 now, maybe even pushing, well, we'll call him 6. So, you know, he's well within that sort of old man age for fish, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. Again, just thinking out loud. Not a lot going on in the tank, just trying to give everybody a look at all the fish that are in there and the plants and so on and so forth. So, moving on to my long ago mentioned 20-gallon angelfish. This is the tank that I was talking about, both having the green growing carpet on the bottom and having the German blue angelfish in there. Now, with the glass being the way it is, obviously we're not really getting a fair look at what the fish actually looks like under the light. This tank is definitely due for a water change, or at the very least a water top off, but I would say it's due for a water change at this point. But if you look at the bottom, you will see all of that green cyanobacteria just grows in a sheet. You can definitely see how it's like a sheeting type growth. Now, I got in there not long ago with my gravel vac, and I gravel vacked it all up and chopped it all up and broke it all loose, and it got all vacked out of there. But I swear that almost made it worse. I only had a few little patches of it when I did that, and that was about a week ago, and now you can see I've got it all over the bottom. So I probably did more spreading it around the tank than I did clearing in the couple little patches that I had out. But if you look at the rest of the tank, it's not growing on any of my plants. It's not growing on the rocks. You know, it almost kind of looks nice. It gives the bottom a nice green color. So cyanobacteria is only as much of a problem as you want to let it be for yourself. If you're somebody that, you know, if you're freaking out about this little bit of algae I got growing on the glass, you know, first of all, we have very different personalities. And secondly, then I could see how you would be bothered by all that cyanobacteria on the bottom of the tank. For me, it's not an issue. It's, you know, it's not even that unsightly. If it was growing all over my leaves, you know, and growing all over the rocks, then it starts, you know, being a little bit of a different story. But I'm not too concerned about it. It's not harmful to the fish. I can't imagine. I've heard stories every now and again about how cyanobacteria can be harmful to humans, but there's probably about 1 million different species of cyanobacteria out there, so I'm not really sure, you know, how to take that kind of information. So I don't worry too much about it. Again, for me, it's just all part of normal tank maintenance. About twice a year, I have to do a simple, chemical treatment on the tank. It kills it all back, and we're good to go for 6 more months. So no different than having to get out and mow the lawn occasionally, or pull weeds in the garden, or rake leaves in the autumn, or whatever. Just part of maintenance. Anyway, that's all that I got going on in there. Nothing else. No fish added. No changes other than the angelfish, but we've already discussed that. My quarantine tank still has the coolie loaches in it. I have still not seen all 4 out at once. I've seen 3. I still have 2 that are black, and one of them has turned white. When I purchased them, I got all 4 of them were black. In fact, they're actually called black coolie loaches. But the other ones that we saw in my gourami tank at the beginning of this video, that little sort of pale colored, sort of earthwormy white one that stuck its face out and we saw, is the same fish. I bought them as black coolie loaches, and they were indeed black when I brought them home. And they were black for a long time in this tank. And then I put them in my gourami tank, and the next time I saw them, they were white. So the only thing that surprised me about this one is how quickly that thing turned white. Within days, it had turned white in this tank. So I know I still have at least 3 of them in here. I don't know if all 4 of them are still alive, but as of this morning, I still have 2 black ones and that one strange-looking white one. So presumably, I've got 2 strange-looking white ones in there somewhere. But they're in quarantine for another week or 2, and then they eventually will make their way over into the gourami tank. And that's pretty much all we've got going on in the quarantine tank. So last but certainly not least, we're not going to get to the waterfall tank in this video. We're already over half an hour, and we've just now gotten to the brackish tank. So not much going on in here other than what we already talked about with the snail shells, and I've made the snail shells harder, and now Butterbean does not chow through them quite as quickly as he used to. He has to work a little harder at the shells, and he has to do a little more of sort of sucking the meat out of them, whereas before he just crunched the shells up like they were just part of the snack, and maybe spit some of the shell bits out, but for the most part he just ate them. They were so soft. We still have my orange sailfin molly in there. The other one died quite a while ago, but I still have that one left. I really would like to add some more mollies in here, some more exotic mollies. I do have a couple sources where I can get some really good looking mollies, but I want to wait until this one is no longer with us. It's pretty old now, so it probably won't be too terribly much longer, but it's a male, and I don't want to put even a pair, like a male and a female, in the tank. If this male, that would make the numbers 2 males and 1 female. So when this one goes, I'm going to try to get myself a pair of really nice mollies of some sort, vampire mollies or something like that, and maybe they will breed in this, mildly brackish water. I don't really keep this tank set to brackish levels anymore. We sit just below brackish, and it has done wonders for Butterbean. He looks so much better. Almost all those lesions are gone. You can see a few little white specks and spots here and there on him, but he used to have, it looked awful. He had just like white lesions all over him. It looked like somebody had been carving him. Scratches and scratches and stuff all over him. And now he looks good. So reducing that salinity definitely helped. I don't know whether it was the simple fact that he was in the same salinity year after year after year, or if it was just too much salinity. I've come to realize over the years, as much as I've always insisted they need to be in brackish water, I've come to realize that they will do just as good in hard water as well. They don't do well in soft water over long periods of time, but they will do fine in hard water, especially if it's very hard water. And then, of course, if you can get up into that sort of lower end brackish, they do good in that too. And I think the trick is just changing it up every now and again, maybe making the water a little more salty one time and then making it a little fresher the next time, and just, keeping all the systems in this fish that are designed to deal with those kind of shifts in salinity, keeps all that stuff working properly or something. I don't know. But he's definitely doing a lot better now that we've reduced the salinity down to just below the level of brackish. And the only other thing I can say about this tank is that while my Java fern here. I know that's weird looking Java fern, but it's growing stunted because of the salt in the water. That is Java fern. And this one has come detached from the rock. I don't know if it ever really grew onto the rock or not, but it's definitely come loose and it's just sort of floating in the water, hanging on by a couple little pieces of root. And all of those big sheets of rusty red cyanobacteria that I had going on in this tank are fading away. So again, once I've reduced the salinity in this tank, all that red cyanobacteria that was in there is just fading away. I didn't do any chemically treatment on this or anything, and yet you can see it went from having like a red carpet over everything to looking like this just by changing the salinity a little bit. So cyanobacteria is weird stuff. Again, I long ago stopped trying to figure it out. I just sort of cope with it, and we go from there. So there you go. I know I said I didn't have anything to talk about at the beginning, but we wound up having a very long marathon, 35-minute round-the-world update. So my regular viewers will know that's nothing unusual for me. I do have the gift of gab and can talk all night. So thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. And don't forget, this one here is my 29 miscellaneous. So thanks again. I'll see you real soon on the next one.